So my name's Lycia Heath. I'm the CEO of Women for Election. Our mission is to inspire more women and non-binary folk from all backgrounds and lived experience to consider themselves as future political leaders, whether that be at the council, state or federal level. And we also give them the tangible skills to equip them to run for office as well, because it's not always clear as to the best way to run and how you do the paperwork and how much it costs and what's the time commitment and all of that kind of jazz. So we make what is currently more opaque, more transparent. I would like to pay my respects to the people of the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. That's where I'm zooming to you from today, and feel free to put in the chat where you're joining us from. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and to future leaders emerging as well. And note that sovereignty of this land was never ceded, and it's my belief that until we reach treaty or a makarata with First Nations people, then our ability to move forward together in harmony is compromised. And I would also like to acknowledge that I think we're making progress in that way at the moment as well. So look, without further ado, a big welcome to Senator Fatima Payman. Thank you so much for joining us today in what is, I'm sure, a very busy time for you.
Thank you for having me, Alicia. It's fantastic to be here. Yes, I mean, I'm so excited for the Uluru Statement from the Heart, for that to be implemented, for that to get on the way. It seems so simple and logical, but the fact that it's long overdue and we're taking those initial steps is just an exciting time to be part of a new incredible government.
Yes, well, look, we have so much that we want to talk to you about today, and we're going to take questions from all of our guests as well. But before we talk about your recent election, which is only back in, well, the election was May 21st, but it was it wasn't immediately that you knew that you were elected. But before you were elected, take us back to the time. Would you say that you were always a political animal? Had you had much experience in that realm? Give us a bit of insight into that.
I wouldn't say I was a political fanatic, but I think politics definitely ran in the blood. My grandfather back in Afghanistan was a member of parliament before the Taliban took over back in 1996. And so I think dinner table discussions with Dad and the family, Dad would always bring up those amazing days where Grandpa was off doing incredible things, and how Dad had dreams of taking me back to Afghanistan and seeing if I stood a chance of running there. But I remember asking him this one time, like, but why not here? Like, why must we go back to Afghanistan? And he was like, well, I don't think anyone will accept us here in Parliament. I don't see any politician that look like us. And so it was just sort of, you just took it for granted that, we don't see ourselves represented. The Parliament here is not really for us. But I wasn't really in the political scene. My dad sort of encouraged me towards the medical field, and I sat multiple exams from school to university. But when I started doing my degree in anthropology and sociology, that's when I fell in love with social arts and just the social sciences of cultures and people, and just the incredible ethnographic cultures that are around us that we're yet to learn. And I think you don't really see yourself stand out because I went to an Islamic college, and so I was surrounded by people of, a similar faith or background to me. And not until I went into university did I sort of realize that people make you feel isolated and ostracized. And, that little activist inside me wanted to come out, just didn't know what avenue, what sort of where she wanted to sort of channel that energy, because I went to my first tutorial in one of my statistic classes, and there was this guy who stood up and said, after I introduced myself, he was like, so is there a bomb under that thing on your head? And I just looked at him and I'm like, I was just really shocked. I was like, well, how did you make it to university with that mentality? Firstly. Secondly, if I did, you wouldn't be alive. But it just showed how narrow-minded people can be. And I mean, it was during that, post 9/11, post sort of what Pauline Hanson, the stunt she pulled in the Senate with wearing the burqa and really, building that animosity and Islamophobia within our society. And but obviously I wasn't too entrenched into the politics of it, and only in hindsight, sort of piecing the events together, I'm like, wow, okay, so it's really valid. No, sorry, that's the wrong word. It's very timely that this classmate of mine made a comment like that when Pauline Hanson had just pulled a stunt like that. But I think my drive for politics came about through my volunteering for NGOs, and Penny Appeal Australia was my first charity organisation that I got involved in. And that was mostly because I didn't know how to handle my grief when I lost my dad in 2018 to leukemia. I just immersed myself into just giving my time up, because I didn't want to have to think about the fact that I've just lost my dad. And I think, just getting involved, giving up my time, getting to meet new people, fighting for causes, whether it was building an orphanage in Zambia, or ensuring that, homeless people in our metro areas had a blanket for winter. I just gave up a lot of my time. And that's when I met Yang, who was the upper house member for South Metro then, a Labor Party MP. And he really just took me under his wing, and I volunteered for the party. And then I started at his office as an electorate officer. And it was from there that my sort of journey within the political sphere began. And that's when I started realizing, change can happen. You just need to find the right platform.
Yeah. Well, there's so much in what you've just said. And I am very sorry that, that university student felt so empowered to say something like that. But now you're sitting in the highest office of the land. So last laugh is a real thing. But beyond that, I think, that you've obviously had lots of points along your life, young, and then as a teenager, then as university, that's motivated you to get involved. And we want nothing more than women who already volunteer out in the world doing things for others, to link the passion with politics, that civil service. So let's skip forward now to, it's election time. You were third on the ticket, on the WA Labor ticket for the Senate, which is not a typical place to win from. Yet here we are. But walk us through the process, because it's not always clear, Senator, in terms of how do you get yourself on a ticket? Is there a pre-selection that you have to go through for that? If you're in a non-winnable position, is there not a pre-selection? Can you shine a light on that for us?
Sure. And this is going back to, a few days before pre-selections closed for the position. And my boss, who's at the union, so I was at United Workers Union as an organizer, and he tapped me on the shoulder and he was like, I have big plans for you in the future, and I feel like you've got a bright future ahead for you. This could be the first stepping stone. do you want to run as the number 3 Senate candidate on our ticket? And I was like, well, what does that mean? What do I have to do? And he basically essentially said, it's an unwinnable spot, hasn't happened since 1984. So you don't need to stress about it. Because I was imposter syndrome. And I don't know if others have ever experienced it, but I was like, man, I've only started with the party since 2019. And here I am, like, putting my hand up for this candidate position. And he was like, trust me, it will just be a good experience, campaigning experience. Because I'm like, I wanted to run in 10 years time, like not yet. And he was like, it will be a great learning experience. And I was like, sure, like, I think after Dad's passing, I've taken every opportunity because, life isn't guaranteed. And I just want to make the most of every moment. And I don't want to live with the regret of what if I went down this route, what could have happened and whatnot. So I was like, okay, fine. And so the pre-selection essentially was just me reaching out to people I knew within the party to sign my nomination form. And it was, the support was overwhelming. Within 24 hours, I got 66 signatures, and they were all valid party members who actually offered to come to my house, and they were like, we will sign it, just give us a time and we'll be there. And I remember that first night I was out until like 10:30 collecting signatures. And so people, including MPs, were just thrilled. They're like, yeah, like, go for it. Even if it's an unwinnable seat, like, this, it's a great sort of opportunity for somebody who was just young Labor president in 2021 to now be running as a candidate. And so, I submitted my paperwork, and the people who were contesting that spot, they either weren't able to collect 25 signatures. I think 25 is the minimum. And a few didn't qualify in terms of just their either their experience or their paperwork wasn't complete, or they didn't meet the deadline. But anyways, I think that wasn't really tough for me. The tough aspect of all this was renouncing my Afghan citizenship. And this was immediately after the fall of Kabul in the hands of the Taliban in August. And the embassy, when I first contacted them, they were like, look, there are no official authorities back in Afghanistan. We can't say that we can process all the applications. Like, it's just not possible. And I'm like, well, I can't go back to Afghanistan to do this. I don't know if I'll come out alive. And it's just not something that the Taliban recognize. And so there was just months of back and forth with the embassy and lawyers, both within the party and externally, who were able to, expedite the process, but also ensure that I have exhausted all my options to renounce my citizenship because I was born in Kabul. And once that was successfully done, that's when I was like, okay, now I can focus on campaigning, because you're just sort of in limbo. You're like, I don't know, do I even qualify? It's a lot of mental and emotional stress that you go through. But I respected the fact that it needed to be done. And it was just my bad luck that Afghanistan had fallen into the hands of the Taliban just when I'm deciding to run. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. That gives us good insight, because it's not clear if you're not a party member. There's a few things I picked up in what you said there. Firstly, you weren't a party member for eons before you ran, which is or before you got on a ticket. And that's quite different today versus how it was 30 years ago. But a lot of things restrict women saying, oh, I'm 45, I've never joined a party, maybe I shouldn't. But you've demonstrated, and others have demonstrated that we've interviewed, that it's those rules don't apply like they used to. 25 signatures, that's all you needed. Wow, that's something I learned. I didn't know that either. But the section 44, for those on the call, mean you have, of our constitution, means we have to renounce citizenship if we have citizenship in another country. That is a restriction that Australia places on our citizens that the US or New Zealand or Canada or the UK don't apply. So maybe that's something that the Senate can work towards, Fatima, from this point. But we don't have those restrictions at the state or council level, I want to note as well. That's why we have more cultural diversity at that level than we do at the federal level. Okay, you've got your 25 signatures. You weren't supposed to win. You did win, which is awesome for you and our country, which makes you the 5th youngest senator who's ever been elected. You're 27, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I am 27, being the 5th, and actually in the current parliament, I am the youngest. It's quite overwhelming, not gonna lie. It's all new, hectic, exciting, but really humbling. And I think that's something that, just constantly keeps me grounded of Australia has spoken, Australia got me elected, WA in particular, but it's this shift towards that, it's that positive shift towards that diversity and representation that everyone wants to see. And there's no such thing, as we've seen in this election, no such thing as a safe seat, right? Like everyone is taking their democratic freedom of voting seriously. In an age where people like Boris Johnson and Donald Trump get elected, it's far more important now than ever to ensure that we do that research to see who we get elected and who we want to be our representation in Parliament.
Yes, we'd love to work with you. We work with all our alumni about motivating more young women across the country to see themselves as political leaders at whatever level of government interests them. But the average age of politicians in this country is older than all of the other countries that I mentioned before as well. So, how can we all work together to inspire more younger women to get involved? And I think by seeing people like you is one answer. Do you have other thoughts?
I think people shouldn't let their cultural beliefs or cultural, because we've seen the census come out, and 50% or more of Australians have a parent who's born overseas, or they themselves are born overseas. And it may not be a holistic, complete image of what Australia is, but we see the modern day Australia is very different to what it was 100 years ago. And I think what message I'd like to send young women out there is, don't let your cultural expectations hold you back, because I did struggle with that. It wasn't as easy as pre-selections, go through campaigning, and then you get elected. I had internal struggles of within my own community who weren't really supportive, because, well, as a 27-year-old girl who's not married yet, well, what are you doing with your life? Wow, it's a male-dominated field, politics. It's a dirty game for men. What are you doing there? And it's like, well, don't bring your baggage from, your hometowns into a country where we're trying to shape the discourse. We're trying to, modernize the space, but also to ensure that there's equality and equity in all industries and all fields, that there's equal representation. And it's really tough. And then there's social media, right, where you're shunned for everything you do, and that you can't please everyone. But it's so important, for me at least, to constantly remind myself, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for?
Yep.
And it's even more difficult when you're visibly different, right? Like, to the extent where even journalists or hosts at radio stations would be like, so how long did it take you to practice your accent? And I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, I came to Australia as an 8-year-old. I've gone through the schooling system. Like, this is how I speak. I haven't stood in front of the mirror and practiced any particular accent. But it just shows that there is quite a lot of growing to do in that space. But, you know, with what I've noticed with women in particular, we've such resilience and determination that once we put our mind to something, we will do anything in our power to achieve it. And I think for me in particular, one of the events that really propelled me towards this change was when I was at an event with about 200 people, and a senior lady in her maybe 60s came up to me and she was like, so how do you fit in all this? And I just looked at her and I was like, how do you respond to that? Like, would she have gone to my friend Sharon over there, who's your average, you know, blonde, mid-30s woman, you know, would she have asked her how she fits in all this? But, you know, it's those sort of situations where I was like, you know what, I'm going to push myself out of my comfort zone, because there's no growth that's going to happen in my comfort zone. And I'm going to purposefully put myself in situations where I'm the only one who's sticking out in the room.
Yeah. And
I'm going to start there. And I did. And people start realizing that there's potential behind this bravery or courage that you put up. And trust me, it was hard. You know, you got to fake it till you make it, because it's not as simple as, you know, breaking those barriers. It's not as simple as just having a simple conversation. It's physically being present, engaging with what's, you know, at the table, but also representation doesn't only reduce you to a tokenistic image. Like, I'm not there just for photo ops. I don't want to be at the front of the photo because I look different and there's a quota. This is because I've done the hard yards. I've worked really hard. I've squeezed like maybe 6 years of campaigning within the 3 years that I was involved in the Labor Party. Like, didn't think about, I have to, you know, take my weekends off. Volunteering was just, you know, after work hours, weekends. And I know that I sacrificed a lot of family time to get to where I am. But like I said, I was determined to prove some people wrong. And, you know, I just put my mind and heart into the work I did. So,
well, now you're sitting in the chamber, you're at the decision-making table. You've had only 2 weeks of sitting time so far, with a couple of weeks coming up shortly as well. Can you give us your first impressions of walking the halls of Parliament House? You know, we want the good, the bad, and the ugly. Your preferences to what order?
Sure. The bad, I would say, was probably the fact that the whole place looks so identical, and it's like a maze, honestly. And because, you know, I'm from the three new out of the new senators, there's 3 of us who are in the House of Reps side. So just sort of navigating the halls of House of Reps members, but then having to sit in the chamber in the Senate side, it's just a bit to get your head wrapped around. I was actually shocked at how women in other parties, whether it's the opposition or whether the Greens, they were so welcoming towards me. You know, it was almost like female empowerment supersedes the party you're in. Like, women are always going to back each other up. And it was just so heartwarming to receive that warm welcome. You know, like Melissa Waters would come up to me and she would, you know, just sort of have a quick chat of how you finding things. If you ever need help, I know your party's there, but feel free to reach out. Or Marine Faruqi from the Greens as well. Linda Reynolds from the Liberals here in WA. she was very welcoming to the extent where one of them been this kind to anybody. And so it's just, I don't know what it is, but I personally have received so much support from everyone, and even, you know, I think just it's quite daunting. It's a very daunting, a lot of information to sort of get your head wrapped around, whether it's committee work, whether it's just the procedures and formality of what happens inside the chamber, the fact that you're running around when the bells are ringing. I kid you not, I almost felt like I had PTSD when I came back to Perth after the first sitting period. And I'm like, I am hearing the bells ring in my ears. But no, it's all very exciting. And I'm definitely getting used to everyone calling me Senator. It's just weird. I'm like, yeah, I'm Fatima. You can just call me Fatima. I'm cool. But it's just a whole new world that I'm adjusting to. But, you know, I used my first opportunity to speak on a few different issues. But it was such an honor for me when the Prime Minister called and he was like, I want you to do the address and reply to the Governor General's speech. And not only was I like, oh my God, I have the Prime Minister's number, but I was like, man, like, this is huge. Like, I get to start and be the first speaker in the 47th Parliament inside the Senate chamber. Like, it's such an incredible honor. And so when I did my speech, was not expecting to cry, but yeah, got emotional. And, you know, I've spoken about the Uluru Statement from the Heart immediately after, you know, our incredible senator who likes to, you know, create a show all the time. She walked out on the acknowledgement to country. And it was quite shocking that, you know, you've been around for so long, yet how are you so disrespectful to the custodians of this land? Like, you yourself at some point in your life migrated to this country, not like you identify as a First Nations person. So, you know, identity crisis there. So she's got some work to do. But no, it's
well, it might be an unfair, you know, you've only been there 2 weeks, so it might be an unfair question, but it's about, you know, what's that immediate impression. And I must say, this is one of the reasons why we run these sessions, because we only hear the negative stories about entering politics. And you've just told us women cross-party have all been extremely welcoming. And, you know, Fatima, we can't help but feel that part of the politics is toxic narrative is maintained in some ways to keep us out. And that's not to play down that bad things happen at all. It's just that good things also happen, but we don't hear about them in equal quantity. So I'm so glad that's been your experience of cross-party welcoming. And I really want to amplify that.
And for those who watch Question Time, right, it's very theatrical, you know. People actually are really genuinely nice outside the chamber, outside Question Time. Question Time's just their way of, you know, heckling and going all crazy and wild inside the chamber when, you know, ministers ask questions and, you know, there's Dixie questions everywhere. And it's just, it's quite, the first time I was really like, oh my God, what is happening? Why are people like yelling at each other? And then after, you know, that first instance, I was like, oh, okay, this is quite fun. This, I could get used to this. But no, outside the chamber, everyone's so lovely, super helpful, and always willing to, you know, give an advice or two. Because I mean, people call me the baby of Parliament. So I'm like, you know what, I'll milk it. And so my question to everyone is, you know, to your version of your young self when you first entered Parliament, what would be an advice for a first timer? And, you know, they're very helpful and generous with their time, which is incredible.
Good. Well, there we go again. That is fantastic to hear. Look, I've got one more question. I can see questions building in the chat as well, so I'm going to go to those. But so you're the youngest serving senator currently in the parliament. You weren't supposed to get elected, but you did. And this is no pressure. This is not to apply pressure to your first term, but it feels significant. And you're from the Australian Muslim community, you have roots in Afghanistan. How do you hope to use this presence that you have in Canberra?
Well, I think the cultures and sort of identities that shape who we are contribute in the voice we bring to the table and the perspectives that we share. And I think it's, being on the Education and Employment Committee and being on the Environment and Communications, along with Migration and Foreign Affairs, I feel like that somebody hasn't muted themselves and getting feedback.
Oh.
I don't know. It was all good before, but that's fine. I'll continue. Yeah. No, that's much better. Thank you. Okay. So lost my train of thought.
Oh, that's all right. Well, So
just in terms of how I'm going to use those to, be that voice of, so many communities or cultural groups that look up to me, who've had this new wave of hope for a future that, they see themselves reflected, because we can't be what we can't see. We can't be what we can't see. And if we don't have this important institute that, makes laws and decisions on behalf of Australians, and it doesn't, isn't fully representative, are we really doing justice to the Australian community when we're considering their best interests at heart, discussing all these new legislations? And I mean, it is, for me, the challenge would be managing expectations, and also the fact that I'm so new. I need to even, take some time to formulate my own opinions about certain issues, because, I wasn't expected to win. And so I wasn't prepared for any of this. But what I do want to sort of put out there is the type of politician that I want to be is somebody who actually listens more than actually talks, because I don't have the life experience that is amidst so many of our Australians out there who've come from all different walks of life, who've had different challenges. I want to be able to be their voice, share their stories and their struggles, so that we can have a holistic view of what Australians need. And, everyone wants everything fixed right now. And it's just sort of managing that expectation and saying, look, after 9 years of, government that lacked transparency and integrity, and ruined and broke systems that were in operation, that need to be fixed before they're back into their normal function, like Home Affairs, for example. A lot of, especially from the Afghan community, after the siege of Kabul, were like, well, we helped the Australian personnel when they were in Afghanistan, like, how can we, is there a route for us to get out? And it's easier said than done, and it is going to take some time, but knowing that we've got a government who has empathy and that level of understanding to work through these situations and actually take action and do the work that needs doing, rather than just give the impression that they care, but they don't really, they're not really there for the Australian people. So I'm really looking forward to working closely with, ministers across the board, but in particular, Minister Andrew Giles and Claire O'Neill, when it comes to migration that portfolio.
Right. Well, I mean, you're right about managing expectations. I understand and hear you when you say that. And you're right, the agenda is pretty full as well already. And there's only 6 or 7 sitting weeks between now and the end of the year. So we certainly wish you all the best as you find your feet in Canberra and back in your home state as well. I'm going to go to some questions now from the chat.
Sure.
The first one's from Nadia, and she said she heard you when Parliament first started sitting with PK on Radio National and wanting to build connections in the Senate, including with Pauline Hanson, and that she found your optimism and positivity really refreshing. She's interested to know how that's going and how you're planning on building connections with your new colleagues.
Everyone so far has been lovely. You know, I'm getting very close with David Pocock, who is not only a celebrity in his own means, but is so driven in ensuring that there's integrity and action on climate change. But with Pauline Hanson, look, I think she was approached by ABC News for a comment, and she declined when I said that, you know, I'd love to have a cup of tea with her. If she was around the chamber and Parliament often, I would have definitely, you know, extended that offer. But I just feel like whenever we come in, do our morning prayer and acknowledgement to country, she leaves the chamber. And it's like, you don't see her until question time. And then after that, she's gone again. So it's like, I don't know where she's at and what she's doing, but
she's not there for the legislative part of the sessions.
The committees.
Yeah,
she's like, I haven't seen, she's in none of my committees. I'm not sure what committees she's on and what work she's doing, but I hope she's doing justice to the people who've elected her.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. So great question, Nadia. So maybe connections specifically still to be built in that example. But it sounds like connections are building elsewhere. Dominique, a question from Dominique. What was the profile of number 1 and number 2 on the ticket? Were they existing senators already elected or long-term party members? Keen to know, because you did the impossible winning from number 3. I'd say improbable, Dominique.
Improbable. Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. So number 1 was Senator Sue Lines, who's now the current president of the Senate. And so she was going into re-election. And the second senator was Glenn Sterl, who was also going into re-election. So those 2 were, I would say, the safe seats. And it was almost guaranteed that they'd be re-elected. Again, imposter syndrome, I was like, you know, they've been around in the party for so long. They do have a following to a certain degree. But then I think, I'm not sure if you guys are across my social media followers, but I've got about 32,000, which makes me the second most followed senator in all of Australia after Senator Penny Wong. And I mean, I can never contest with Senator Penny Wong. She is my idol. So just sort of like seeing the following build up, the followers build up in Facebook, that's what made me realize that, yeah, Australia has this appetite for better representation. And, you know, Australia is spoken, which is great.
Thanks again, Fatima. And thanks for the question, Dominique, as well. This is a toughie from Nicole. 30 years from now, if you look back, what is one policy change you want to say that you helped achieve?
Oh, wow. That's a big question, Nicole. It's almost like, should I take that on notice and get back to you in 30 years' time? I would definitely want to be part of the diversifying of Parliament. You know, we've had enough male, pale, stale No, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Pale, stale,
Doesn't matter the
male.
order.
They're all the same. Like, we've had way too many of them, and I think I would like to continue inspiring young women and women of all backgrounds and identities to put their hand up. And, you know, if I can inspire just one person to have that courage, then I think I would have done my job. Because I don't want, you know, I don't want to sort of end that drive towards change with me. I want many women in all levels of government to start putting their hand up, for me to be that support system wherever I can be, and however, in whatever capacity I can provide that support, to just be able to uplift women and remove those stereotypes that, you know, you have to become a housewife and you have to bear children and that's all your life is. You know, times are really changing, and we need to move on with times, and it's empowering those women and saying, yes, you are able to do it. Because, you know, if I could do it as a migrant woman whose dad was a refugee and came here on a boat, anyone can do it.
Yeah, those are inspiring words. Thank you, Fatima. And in fact, the next question's from Haswani, and she says, thank you for being so honest and inspiring. You totally deserve your spot, and you're lighting up the minds of so many young women and girls of color. It's a related question. What's one cause that is dearest to your heart? So you've just talked about diversifying federal parliament, like, and maybe that's a constitutional process. Maybe it's, you know, working more with women for election, or working with Emily's List, or whatever it happens to be. But what is the change that you'd like to see soon? So let's compress 30 years to this term.
Some of the things that I'm really excited to see, and I, as a former young Labor president, that I've seen, is the lack of action around climate change, and the fact that accessible housing for young people in particular, you know, isn't addressed. Like, that issue, and voices of young people isn't something that's, you know, it feels like it just slips through the crack. And that's something that I hope to, you know, a fresh perspective I hope to bring to the current parliament. As somebody who's under the age of 30, I really do want to, you know, use the next few years to really push for what are we doing for young people? Can we have their voices heard in the discussion? You know, regardless of what, you know, what their capacities are and what on the spectrum where they sit in their belief system or ideology, it's so important for them to know that they have the support of an institution that will make laws and legislation that will impact their lives for many years to come. So for me, it's that aspect that I want to specifically focus on over the next few years. And then who knows, in 30 years time, what I would have achieved. So, but thanks for the question.
Thank you. And there's one last question from Sandy. Oh, and then I think I have a question from Carly as well. And then I know we have to let you go as well. So from Sandy, congratulations, Senator Payman, on responding to the GG in the opening of the 47th Parliament. How will you build relationships with people in your state? And how do you feel about representing a state rather than an electorate?
Sandy, I love that question. I love that question, Sandy. Thank you so much, because I was telling Mum the other night that I just feel like there's so much to do, and 6 years isn't long enough. And like, I have all of WA to like explore and people to talk to and concerns and issues to hear about. But I just think I'll definitely want to use my opportunity as a senator who actually represents the whole state rather than just a particular electorate, because wearing multiple hats allows me to, you know, I can definitely, you know, empathize with somebody who's from a refugee background, seeing the struggles that my dad went through, but I can also empathize with somebody who's a woman of color or a person of color, somebody who may be of a particular faith, somebody who may be young and just feels like their voices are underrepresented. Like, wearing multiple hats, I just feel like I do have a scope to really tap into the demographics within WA that are often unheard. And I know this is a very ambitious plan, and I know you guys are recording this and you will hold me to account one day, but I do hope to, in the 6 years that WA have given me this honor and privilege of representing them, I hope to travel as many, regions and whether they're local small towns in rural areas or whether they're metro bigger towns. But I do want to be able to travel all of WA and talk to people and hear about their issues, hear about their circumstances, because until you meet with people and hear their stories, you'll never be able to fully encompass the diversity of a state. And in particular, WA is huge. But it's crazy how we say that what the relationship or the drive I have to represent WA, but also there's been so much interest from people over East who want me traveling there and talking and inspiring, or connecting with other communities over East. And as much as I would love to, there's only 52 weeks in a year, and 22 of those are spent inside the chamber in Parliament House. But it's just trying to make time, and even if it's between two sitting weeks, where the weekend I'm able to go to Victoria or Queensland and just talk to communities there, meet their local MPs and see what's important to them, wearing my multiple hats that I represent so many demographics. It's truly an honor, and I want to be able to maximize my role in that as much as I can.
Yeah, look, amazing. And yes, we are recording. So it was at the end of the 6 years that we can go back and say, have you been to the Four Corners and everywhere in between? And I'm sure you will be able to, maybe even twice over. Look, there's Carly, I am going to go to Saleha's last question there. You've inspired us so much by your thoughts. Thank you, Fatima. I am working in the community sector for 10 years. I came as a refugee in Australia, and I'm from Afghanistan too. I've faced so much challenges working within the community. How do you feel about representing the community, and what are some changes you'd like to bring
within the community and the wider multicultural communities? Saleha, it's lovely to meet you, and thank you for the work and service you've been doing along with everyone else on this group video conference. How do I feel about representing the community? It's an absolute honor. It is such a big privilege, as a 27-year-old, to say that there are so many communities out there who are looking up to me with that level of hope for a future that they will see for their children, that they'll see for children of many other multicultural communities. And as much as, I feel so much joy and pride for being an Afghan and for being Muslim, the underlying common denominator that we all have is we're Australian. And that's what I would like to highlight, that we can be from all parts of the world and have our particular views about, a different community. It's something that we leave back in those home countries, and, we come to Australia and we share this incredible land, but we learn about each other and the different cultures. One of the challenges that I experienced, and I'm going to be super frank in my campaign, is I'm not sure if everyone's across the different ethnicities and ethnic groups within Afghanistan. And this has been an internal sort of battle within Afghanistan for a very long time. There are so many different ethnicities, and there's this constant battle of like, who's the best, or I don't know, like it never occurred to me that I'm from a particular ethnic group until I had to ask my parents, like, what are we? Like, people are talking about all these different groups, like Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara, Pashtun. What does that mean? Because when you grow in such a multicultural society, you're like, well, we're all Australian, and then, you know, these are our cultural, this is our cultural heritage. And I just refer to myself as Afghan. But during my campaign, the Hazara community in particular were very upset when somebody asked me if I was Hazara, and I said, I identify as Tajik and Uzbek, because that's where my parents are from. Dad's from Tajikistan, mum's from Uzbekistan, and their families migrated to Afghanistan and they started a life there. And so I was like, I'm half Tajik, half Uzbek. And they took that, they found that offensive. And I was quite, I don't know, uncomfortable about the fact that they found that, you know, they took it as an offense, because I was like, well, why does it matter which part of Afghanistan I'm from, right? And so there are going to be those challenges where one community has some history of animosity with another community and they don't want you representing the other community, and it's not really nice. And that's something that I really want to encourage all communities to leave behind and to move on and to find ways of building bridges rather than burning bridges. Because, you know, as an Australian community, we need to be thinking about the prosperity of this nation that we call home. I went to the Pakistani Independence Day celebration, and all of a sudden everyone on Facebook started attacking me, saying things like, oh, Pakistan harbors terrorists, and why are you going and celebrating with people who, you know, tore your home country and stuff. And I was like, where is this coming from? Like, this is an Australian Pakistani community that are just celebrating their Independence Day, you know, and then the next day was the Indian National Independence Day. So it was almost like you can never please everyone. But I want to be that unifying factor, bringing communities together and saying, we're Australian first and foremost, then we're the community that we associate with, or the ethnic cultural community that we're a part of. So it's really important to always keep that in mind. And that also helps you, you know, not have that identity crisis, right? Because a lot of, as a young person myself, I was like, oh, so how much of my Muslim identity do I practice, and my Afghan identity, and then there's Australian values that I'm learning as I grow up. And it's marrying and finding a balance between all three that can be challenging, but understanding that we're all Australian honestly makes life so much easier. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Saleha, for the question and for taking yourself off video for the response as well. I think it's a wonderful, you know, wonderful words to wind up on. And I love the, you know, building bridges, not burning bridges. The idea that we have more community builders in our parliaments at any level, I think can only be a positive for our country. So congratulations on your election, and good luck with the 6 years ahead. And thank you so much for your time today as well. So
thank you so much.
We can give everyone if we can give a Zoom clap, please, for Fatima. And, you know, welcome. I mean, make sure that you know when our future events are as well. We have a masterclass coming up at the end of this month on political branding. We have an In Conversation interview coming up with Commissioner Nikki Vincent and also with Bridget Archer over the coming 7 weeks. There's a lot going on. We're moving into like peak election cycle. You thought it was the federal election. got a Victorian state election and a Tasmanian and South Australian local government election, New South Wales state election early next year. So, and I know a number of you on this call are campaigning currently. So stay close. We're here to support. And thank you again, Senator, for your time today.
Thank you, Lucia and Carly, for organising this, and everyone who participated. It means so much to me that you've taken a great deal of interest in my story. But power to you all for the upcoming elections. And I'm happy for you guys to share my contact details with everyone in attendance. And feel free to reach out, because if we don't support one another, you know, what are we there for? And, you know, I'm just super amazed and just dumbfounded by the fact that there's just an incredible group of women who are doing incredible work out there in our communities. So thank you so much.
That's our pleasure. Have a great day, everybody, and see you at the next event.
See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.